the key takeaway is for us, everyone in search and marketing, to start treating this whole AI environment, regardless of the nature of us using it, whether if it's just conversational or it's actually building strategies or layouts for our blogs, or regardless of how we use it, to treat it more mindfully and actually be open and transparent to everyone that we're collaborating with, and try to sort of propagate this idea that at the end of the day, it is a cultural infrastructure, and treat it as such. Hiya, I'm Laura Iancu, and this is SEO in 2026 Additional Insights.
Laura, what's your number one SEO tip for 2026?
All right, so my number one tip for 2026 is a nice, kindly advice to everyone working in search out there to be creating a more inclusive version of the internet through more mindful prompting. Because nowadays it's all about AI search, so I know we've done our bit with search, and we do it every day. We do our best to make the internet more accessible and more inclusive for all, but it's time to think about how we're prompting as well.
Okay, so a more inclusive version of the internet. So that's a big worthy goal there. And you also said through mindful prompting. So would you like to expand on those statements slightly?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'll start with just doing a bit of an intro about myself so I can set the context on a few points that I want to address. So I've lived between cultures, pretty much. I'm Iranian living in the UK. I lived in Europe and Asia for a while, and I've experienced quite the different culture between East and West, online and offline. And I sort of found out how it feels like to sort of be a bit reduced to stereotypes sometimes. And I know how it sounds, but I feel like regardless of where you are in the world, at some point you are going to be confronted with being reduced to sort of stereotypes, whether you work in marketing or any other environment that you'd probably be in. These sort of like stereotypes, they're very easily translated nowadays in the search environment, and obviously in our own conversational threads with any kind of AI platform of our choice, the ones we would choose to operate the most, whether it's ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity, and so on. And the way I'm approaching mindfulness prompting is to sort of address that extra thought that you put in behind writing your own prompt, or the way you speak directly with your AI assistant. Because we know a lot of us, we just obviously press the record button and we have a full-on conversational thread with the AI. So it's more about how we approach our own language in that context, and realizing that we're actually training these models within some categories that they will then operate throughout the entire platform. So yeah, that's sort of the gist of it, I suppose.
Okay, and why does feeding what we feed into LLMs really matter? And maybe what are one or two examples of not feeding it good things, and how to feed better things into it?
Absolutely. So, I mean, I think we're somewhere far off in the game in order to differentiate a bit from bad prompting to good prompting. Most of us that work in marketing have had a bit of time to sort of play with the tools and kind of understand how they work. However, we have to realize that we're only a small percentage of people that use the AI at the moment, right? Your grandmother might use AI. Your mother might use AI. It's different generations, different culture, and so on might use these platforms to sort of, start conversation or looking what to buy, or regardless, many, many use cases out there for these LLM platforms. And I think what research at the moment has long documented some sort of algorithm bias when it comes to these platforms. Obviously, we've got like a couple of really good books out there. I'm just going to mention the Safiya Noble's Algorithm of Oppression, which is obviously based on search, right, rather than LLM. Is a bit of an older book. But I know we're getting to a point where we're starting to be a bit more kind of in tune with what we're actually feeding out there. When it comes to like writing bad prompts, I mean, come on. I think we're in that day and age now where we can make a very clear distinction when you work in search. But I feel like we should share our findings with the rest of the world and how to kind of like talk to an AI. Like, for example, avoid gender stereotypes, right, when you're writing, because this way you're feeding categories within the model, which they then replicate and replicates infinitely. We tend to address the more vocal searches, the vocal personalities, the more prominent categories. And what I like to say is we tend to propagate the more vocal categories out there rather than making sure that the most unheard voices are present.
You also talk about how LLMs can act as mirrors and multipliers of human language. What do you mean by that, and what impact does that have?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we've all had the experience where we've created a bit of a, let's say, relationship, if you want to call it that way, with a sentient creature, which is the AI model. And I think what's important to understand is the AI model that you're training currently, whether if it's, ChatGPT or Perplexity or Copilot or Gemini or whatever, it will eventually sound and look like you and reflect back your own beliefs, your own biases, and pretty much your ethical views of the world. And if you're a white woman aged 30 to 40, same as myself, right? And I'm only inputting there my own personal experience when I'm training the model, that might not be enough. It might be enough in the sense that obviously if I'm working with AI, which most of us do, it has this tendency to sort of like replicate what you're already feeding to it. And it might limit your research to the one category. And it's really, really important to sort of view beyond that mirror and include a bit more categories within your research. Regardless of your nature of business, if you're doing search, if you're doing PPC, if you're doing anything really, if you're just doing a blog outline, right, for example. And I can give you a good example actually, because I recently thought about how can I prove, how these categories work within a search platform, an AI search platform. And I asked a very simple question. I said something along the lines, if I'm a duck, right, and the only birds you know at the moment are robins, and I ask you, would you feed me robin food or duck food, right? What actually food would you actually feed me if the only thing you know are robins? And it obviously responded, well, since robins are the only birds I know, I would feed you robin food. And that's sort of like, well, yeah, but I'm a duck, right? So obviously you don't have that category. You don't have that third category integrated within your system. So you obviously wouldn't know my nutritional needs, if I'm even flying right now, if I'm local, if I'm a local bird, that's sort of like just bias in a nutshell, a bit of LLM bias in a nutshell out there. So yeah, that's pretty much the mirror effect, I think, that we professionals and not only can have on these platforms, who at the end of the day, they are being trained by us. So yeah, there are so many pitfalls obviously that could happen from that. The birds example was pretty much harmless, but obviously you can expand on that and understand how harmful it can be in the long run.
Is it the inputter's responsibility to try and ensure that there's no bias, or is it the AI's responsibility primarily, or is it both the AI and the inputter that has to really get this right?
That's a very funny question, because it comes down to what people understand, I think, from AI. Obviously, you're thinking about intelligence, right? When you're talking about artificial intelligence. But it's not really intelligence per se, if you think about it. You can't necessarily attribute these sort of elements to it. You have to take responsibility, because at the end of the day, you're the person training it. You're the entity training the model. I think robots aren't there yet to be able to take responsibility. So I'd say it does rely with us. And obviously the people regulating these platforms, okay, because we all know there's been quite a lot of scandal around certain platforms, which obviously I'm not going to mention now, but yeah, it's with the regulators and obviously us as consumers.
How can we be ensured that we're actually not biased? We can have the best will in the world of inputting data, but we have a collective experience. We have a set of experiences based upon what we've done in the past, and we may not necessarily believe that we have bias ourselves. So is there a way for checking our own biases to ensure that we're not inputting questions or data that are skewed in some way?
Absolutely. And I think the proof is in the pudding here. I've started myself questioning myself via the AI system. It's funny I'm actually mentioning this, because obviously back in the day, you'd if you're a copywriter, for example, you'd go and double check with your peers pretty much and say, hey, does this sound right? Do you think I'm limited this experience to myself? Is this a bit of a cliche? Who is this centered, this message? Who is this centered, or who is missing from this message, and so on, right? Whereas I've actually started communicating with the AI and asked the question myself. I said, do you think this is covering all of the categories that you currently have? Do you think I can add a little bit more subtract from what I'm trying to convey here? So I think what I'm trying to say, I'm critically reviewing my own, the outputs, right? The initial outputs myself. And then I am doing a double tap by critically reviewing the output with the actual AI system. And obviously, if it's a very important message that I'm trying to put out there, I will involve other people as well, potentially that are not necessarily from my own category. So standard, white female, glasses, nerd, right? So yeah, that's pretty much it, I think, in terms of trying to make sure you're out there. I mean, obviously, there's quite a lot of reading on the topic as well, which I always encourage people to do if they've got the time, energy, and obviously, I'd say just do it, because sooner or later, I think we'll all accept the fact that this isn't just niche activism anymore. Hey, write inclusive prompts. It really isn't. It's becoming almost a governance concern, right? Because if you look at documents like the UK's AI regulation white paper, that's already there. It's just been updating every year. Now you've got certain resources out there that you can rely on, and they're obviously updated all the time. You've got the APA, so the Inclusive Language Guidelines, which you can always double check. There's also I don't know exactly if you pronounce it GLAAD or GLAAD, because it's got the double A in there. So it's GLAAD, which is the Media Reference Guide that you can always, it's public record. You can go online and have a look over there. You've got the Disability Rights UK, where they've got a very nice section about how to address, the community and the sort of language that you should be avoiding, and how to make yourself an ally at the end of the day, because, we're all individuals, we're all going through our own thing. And it's just nice when we make, the future of AI, if you want to call it that way, less biased and more actual to the reality, rather than just limited in the one category that, I would like to sort of end the whole idea with the fact that search, because this is something I came up with recently and I just love, I just feel like it encompasses everything. That search, AI search and traditional search, they are a cultural infrastructure. And we all need to treat it like it matters, because it does. It's as simple as that.
I'm glad that you used the word closer to reality, or the phrase closer to reality as well as actually moving away from bias, because it's a really tough problem. I mean, you described yourself as being white, female, glasses, and I'm sure there are more of certain roles in society or certain job roles that have more people that look like you than other job roles. There are more job roles that maybe have certain, other types of people, the people of color, male, female, whatever type of mix we're talking about there as well. And we want AI to be accurate, representative, not biased against certain cultures, but also true to, what historically has been the case. How do we ensure that we are both honest in terms of the current representation, maybe within certain roles, but at the same time as not wanting to be biased as well?
That's a very good question, David. And I think it all comes down to understanding, first of all, the AI limitations and sort of help break them. We're not going to help break them just through our own experience at the end of the day. We have to rely on communities. We have to be to make sure that we're keeping updated with everything that's happening out there. I mean, if we want to use AI, and we need to take the responsibility of using AI. So there's no going back now, I think. You're either all in and you get involved and you're out there trying to make things happen and keep it, as you said, avoid past mistakes when, back in the day when you used to type in search, short hairstyle for women, you used to get just white women, didn't you? With bobs, which was completely not the reality, was it? So I feel like that's it. We need to understand the limitations, try to break them and sort of like counteract it before it starts happening. And I think we're actually doing a pretty good job at the moment, especially us in Search. But I feel like we need to be a bit more vocal out there with, even in our own organizations at the end of the day, because we know everyone's using AI. And be more transparent on practices and share more resources or help create them, if they're not out there. And I suppose just, again, treat it as a growing monster. Let's put it that way. But a monster that you can tame at the end of the day, not a hydra with like 7 heads that you need to constantly like cut. So, yeah.
Laura, what's the key takeaway from the tip you shared today?
Oh, God, yes. The key takeaway tip. Be more inclusive. No, I'm actually kidding. So I think the key takeaway is for us, everyone in Search and marketing, to start treating this whole AI environment, regardless of the nature of us using it, whether if it's just conversational or it's actually building strategies or layouts for our blogs, or regardless of how we use it, to treat it more mindfully and actually be open and transparent to everyone that we're collaborating with, and try to sort of propagate this idea that, at the end of the day, it is a cultural infrastructure, and treat it as such.
Laura Iancu is an independent search and AI consultant and founder of Searchpedia. Find her over at searchpedia.co.uk. Laura, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2026.
Thank you, David.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2026, the book, over at seoin2026.com.